Greetings, this is the UAP channel. So today I'm talking about the topic of evil. Evil, you don't want to touch it. Don't touch it, it's evil. You might explode. It's no good, you don't want evil. But I'm going to wax philosophical today, asking silly questions, perhaps not so silly. So let's just have a start here. And we'll take a look at the movie Time Bandits, and then we're going to look at a little bit of a Twilight Zone for contextual, educational apprisement of thoughts, modes of thought, and ideals that are presented in an ingenious way that you could intuitively understand. So, with that word salad, let's get started.
Why did they have to die?
You might as well say, why do we have to have evil?
Oh, we wouldn't dream of asking a question like that, sir.
Yes, why do we have to have evil?
Well, why do we have to have evil? It has something to do with free will. That's the answer given in the movie. And I would tend to agree. Though I'm not attempting to speak for God, let's do a mental exercise and look at what perfection may look like without, quote, without evil.
I can't decide. I think 12 might suit you better. What do you think, Marilyn? I don't understand you, darling. Most girls your age are thrilled to death when it comes time to pick a pattern. Oh, I looked at him.
If everybody's perfect, then nobody's perfect. And you would forget about the truth of things, just like we don't know about the truth of our past. Because history is a strange place that doesn't make sense anymore.
I remember how excited I was before I was done. I couldn't sleep for nights. Marilyn, what are you looking at, dear? You. Picture of you before. Yes, that's me, before my transformation. Mother, I think you were beautiful.
The way God made you, male and female, the way you were made, right?
Mother, I think you were beautiful. Well, I certainly don't. If I didn't want the transformation, I wouldn't have to have it, would I? The transformation is the most marvelous thing that could happen to a person. Just think, very soon now, you can look like that. Won't that be...
They do it to kids. Almost every child has something like that foisted upon them, from vaccines to something as extreme as gender transformation.
What's so terrible about being beautiful?
Given the chance, what young girl wouldn't happily exchange a plain face for a lovely one? What girl could refuse the opportunity to be beautiful? For want of a better estimate, let's call it the year 2000.
For want of a better estimate, let's call it the year 1019.
At any rate, imagine a time in the future when science has developed the means of giving everyone the face and body he dreams of. It may not happen tomorrow, but it happens now, in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah. So, let's see. What does the perfection look like? Does it seem like there's an absence of evil when perfection is given?
Who is it?
My Uncle Rick.
Now take it easy with that Uncle Rick stuff, will you? What are you trying to do, make me feel old? You know, honey, your mother is very worried.
I don't want to be transformed. I want to stay ugly.
Your
so
father
funny.
was transformed.
She's not ugly.
Yes, number 17, just like you.
A very popular number these days.
Yes, but is that good? Being like everybody? I mean, isn't that the same as being
Yes.
nobody?
I think it's time you tell me where you're getting these radical ideas.
But, Uncle Rick, there's got to be more to life than just that.
You are a very sick girl.
Hi, Marilyn.
Hi, Valerie. She told you, didn't she?
Yes, she did. But it isn't as if it hurts or anything. When they did mine, I didn't feel a thing.
I liked you before the transformation.
But you're missing the point. It's like getting a new hairstyle or new clothes.
It is wrong, Valerie. I don't want to look like everyone else. I want to look like me. And I'm not going to let them change me. I won't let them change me. Doctor will see you
It's
now.
state mandated.
Come in, please,
For
Louder.
your
Thank you, Doctor.
own good. They've transformed many things, like Tartary has been transformed into the Soviet Union and just out of existence, out of thought, out of mind, out of memory, by the wizards and scienticians.
I see you're 18 now. You see, we haven't given her any definite reason why she must wait until the age of 19.
Doctor.
From pure perfection of body, face, limb, pigmentation, she looks at herself and she's horrified. Isn't that so, of course?
She isn't anxious.
No. She's not anxious. She is a thinking person. She has critical thinking skills that are employed. And she's not an extrovert. She's an introvert. She comes up with her own ideas about what she likes, what she doesn't like. It's not based on what everybody else thinks. For a long time in my life, I wanted to be an extrovert because it was more cool and popular, but I don't.
I don't want to have the transformation.
You what?
I just don't want the change.
The transformation has become a normal part of growing up.
What? Being like everyone else?
Would you mind if I conducted an experiment with you, purely for my own records? There we are. That's all there is to it.
She didn't exactly consent.
This case is extremely unusual.
Did you find out what's in there?
That's so
Your general intelligence rating is quite high.
Then why can't I make up my own mind? Why can't I? Why are you going to force me to do something that I don't want to do? You can't make me do it, can you? Nobody can make me do it.
No one has ever been forced to take transformation if he didn't want it. You see, the problem is simply to discover why you don't
That's
want
not a problem. It's his problem, not her problem. And many people have been forced to do many different things by the state, by the excuse of it's for your own good. I think in North Carolina, they experimented or they practiced eugenics on poor black people to sterilize them, and things like that, without consent. And yeah, whenever somebody says nobody ever, you just don't believe them. Not at all.
Here, please.
What place is this?
I am here to help you.
Why? Why does everyone want to force me to do something I don't want to do?
But for your own good. Why, yes. Before the transformation, you could have expected to live 70, 80, perhaps 90 years. But now you can live twice that long. Perhaps 3 times. You would not deny your mother her use, would you?
But you could do that anyway, couldn't you? Keep me young without changing me? I wouldn't mind just that.
You see, the transformation must be performed when the body and the tissue are at the proper state.
No.
Why?
Have you ever read Shakespeare?
Who?
Or Keats or
Or
Shelley?
watched UAP?
Those books were banned many years ago.
Did you know that Dostoevsky was an epileptic? He was ugly. He was deformed. These men wrote about life and about the dignity of the individual human spirit and about love.
This is enough.
May I go?
UAP was extremely
Yes,
handsome, and he
certainly.
still wrote about
I have
this. That's
arranged
why
a
he made
room for
videos.
you. You will be quite comfortable.
Come, my dear.
This way, Lana. She's right in here.
Oh, Mother, they're going to do it anyway. They're going to make me do it anyway. Mother, don't you understand?
Nope.
They don't care whether you're beautiful or not. They just want everyone to be the same, that's all. Don't worry, darling. Everything's going to be all right.
Come in, my dear.
We've been expecting you. She's chosen number 8.
Excellent, excellent.
Girls and Jane Does and the abortion.
Yes,
trial.
yes, she's fine. You'll see for yourself.
I've been so worried these last few days.
Mother! Val! Look at me! What do you think?
You're beautiful, Marilyn.
Can she digest with that waist?
And the nicest part of all, Val, I look just like you.
But in an age of plastic surgery, bodybuilding, and an infinity of cosmetics, let us hesitate to say impossible. These and other strange blessings may be waiting in the future, which, after all, is the Twilight
You got
Zone.
that right. So in the movie The Time Bandits, the Supreme Being, aka God, was shown there as kind of a bureaucrat, in the form of a bureaucrat. Now, I watched this movie a long time ago, and I haven't rewatched it, but I remember it quite well. It made an indelible impression on me. And so these guys are traveling around time with this map. And this scared the crap out of me. The Supreme Being is tracking them down because they stole his map of the world and the secrets that it held. And in the movie, the secrets that it held were portals that allowed you to travel from place to place and also time to time. And it's kind of like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure in that sense. And so they were able to travel back in time, just like we are with this video here. This is old footage from the early 1900s of a vaudeville show, which I thought was interesting with the size of the kitchen, the comparative size of the people being closer to the squatting of the abandoned, mud-flooded, previous old civilization Tartarian homes built for giants, in my opinion. But anyway, that's another matter. So it brings up the question of the problem of evil, which is a classic philosophical question that has been dealt with by theologians of different faiths and philosophies. And so I definitely have my own opinion, which I already gave, that, well, number one, evil exists because of free will, and it's better to have the free will than to not have it, because to not have the free will is almost evil. I mean, did you see it in the Twilight Zone episode, how it almost seemed evil to force a person into, quote, a state of perfection, almost like, well, against their will, without their consent. So they took away her free will, didn't they? And then after the transformation, she didn't even remember her free will, and pretty much everybody may have been like that. And it's like a surreal world. It's not like our own. So that isn't the case of what I consider to be heaven, which would be beauty and everything without the jealousy, without the hatred. It'd be like love and sex without jealousy. Can you imagine that? Or without pride or things like that. So in the movie Time Bandits, and one of the things that made a big impression on me was the Supreme Being spoke of the main, like the devil character, almost in a positive sense, because he was filling a role. He was playing a necessary role, which he said he did a great job of doing, because he didn't actually, he didn't really deal out too much misery.
The problem of evil goes like this. God is all-knowing. God is all-powerful. God is all good. Evil exists in the world. If the three criteria for God are true, how can the fourth statement also be true? If God is all-knowing, he would know when and where evil would happen. If God is all-powerful, he could always stop evil from happening. If God is all good, he would want to stop evil from happening. Atheists sometimes use this alone as their proof text that God cannot exist, and the very idea is a logical fallacy. Theists instead attempt to solve the problem of evil in a way that is satisfactory to their beliefs. 20th century philosopher and theologian John Hick famously posited that the problem of evil can be solved by explaining that human beings require suffering in order to make them fully realized beings. This is sometimes called the necessity of suffering or the soul-making defense. Hick would say that Kevin suffers under the thumb of his materialistic parents because it is necessary for his growth. When Kevin meets Robin Hood in Nottingham, he sees something peculiar. As Robin redistributes the wealth to the poor, they receive not just riches but a punch in the face. Robin asks his companion if that is absolutely necessary, and he is told that it is. To Hick, the good must come from the bad. Suffering is necessary for a good life. He once wrote, "The value judgment that is implicitly being invoked here is that one who has attained to goodness by meeting and eventually mastering temptations, and thus by rightly making responsible choices in concrete situations, is good in a richer and more valuable sense than would be one created ab initio, in a state either of innocence or of virtue." There are issues with this line of thinking, though. If suffering is necessary for a complete life or for a human being to earn their soul or something, that does not explain why there is so much suffering. It does not logically resolve war, famine, disease, sexual abuse, and many other things. It is unthinkable that a God who is all good would simply see genocide as basically a good thing for humanity. Theists generally do not believe such things. Logically, God could just as easily have us suffer in less egregious ways, like studying for a test or stubbing our toe on the bed. In the film, Agamemnon says that killing sometimes is necessary, but the being he killed was apparently a threat to his people. Innocent people being killed does not seem necessary. A subset of the necessity of suffering answer is the claim that human life is only a test for the afterlife, but that does not explain why non-human animals suffer. In the Abrahamic faiths, animals do not have souls and cannot ascend into heaven. So why would they suffer? The existence of suffering outside of a human being suggests suffering is not a test for heaven. Another way to solve the logical problem of evil is to conclude that God is not what the Abrahamic faiths claim he is. That the criteria for God is somehow false. He is not one of the three features of God, not all good or all powerful or all knowing. The logical problem with saying God is not all-knowing but is all-powerful is that a being who is all-powerful could simply make himself all-knowing or all-good if he wanted, because omnipotence has no boundaries. So the easiest to take away is just that. God is not omnipotent and cannot possibly be expected to stop all suffering. Napoleon in the film is able to conquer so much territory and kill so many people because God does not have the power to end all suffering. He does the best he can with what he has. The character of Evil in Time Bandits even claims that God did not create him. Evil says that he created himself, meaning God does not have complete control over him. There is a contradiction here, though. Theists sometimes reject the idea that God has great limits to his power because this would contradict God's ability to create the entire universe. Surely a being who can fashion the cosmos out of nothing would also be able to, say, prevent the Titanic from sinking, or would be able to save the passengers.
Or maybe both. Maybe there can be the evil. Maybe that can happen. Maybe it's allowed to happen. Maybe it's meant to happen as part of the test. And whether or not the people actually drowned in the disaster is another question. And perhaps some people aren't really people. Maybe they are NPCs, non-player characters. Maybe they are, maybe that's one of the tasks for the fallen angels, to play these parts, to play these roles in this stage play. And honestly, sometimes I think along those lines, because you see these people who they follow this strange moral code, and it is an odd one where they don't exactly outright lie, but they do mislead. And they always require your consent for you to get yourself into a situation where you're going to have to ask for God's forgiveness. You see what I mean? And so their job is to test you. It's like a sparring partner, except it's more serious, but maybe it's not as serious or as, quote, real as we would believe, because that would be contrary to God's nature. Or another example, all these horrendous news events, it really was the disheartening news or information when you realize that the authorities are faking these events and lying about it. Well, it's tempered by the fact that the events didn't actually happen the way that they said, that the school shooters didn't actually shoot people in the school. And in 9/11, not as many people died, at not even close, as what we were led to believe. And even with wars, there always seems to be a lot of rumor involved with the war, and a lot of it is a lot of the war veterans tell stories of going somewhere and kind of waiting around and sitting and waiting. I'm not saying that they all do that, of course I'm not, because you do hear stories of the action, and you do hear from people who say that they had to do things that they regret. But a lot of times, you just never really hear about it, and so you're assuming that they're not talking about it because they did things that you would think that they would do in war. But maybe it was because they're ashamed they just went there and just kind of did nothing, and they kind of feel guilty for that or something. But that's more of a philosophical pursuit than an actual belief. But it does it is an interesting thing that isn't really addressed in this, that I wanted to bring up because it's something that is, well, worth considering, because we definitely know that, like, for example, these serial killers, a lot of them were hoaxes, which is great, because it's so depressing when you believe that stuff. When, as I did in the past, believed it was like all real, and it was very disheartening and just depressing, and it makes you question, how could God allow such evil and that type of stuff. But when you find out that it's not the case, it's not really like that, there's a bright side to that, for sure.
The most famous answer to the problem of evil is that of the free will defense, which is referenced in Time Bandits. The idea is that being free simply means that we must have choices, and sometimes those choices lead accidentally or purposefully in disaster. The free will defense posits that allowing us free will maximizes good, and that this is the best of all possible worlds. 20th century philosopher Alvin Plantinga famously stated, "The existence of God is neither precluded nor rendered improbable by the existence of evil. Of course, suffering and misfortune may nonetheless constitute a problem for the theist, but the problem is not that his beliefs are logically or probabilistically incompatible. The free will defense, however, shows that the existence of God is compatible both logically and probabilistically with the existence of evil, thus it solves the main philosophical problem of evil." The great evil of the film is represented by materialism. The robbers use God's map to loot various time periods. Kevin's parents spend their days worrying whether or not their belongings, particularly their appliances, are good enough compared to the appliances of their neighbors. The personification of evil strongly believes in technology, always speaking about how computers are the wave of the future. Kevin warns them not to touch the piece of evil that is inside one of the parents' appliances, but they do anyway, exercising their free will, and it kills them. Time Bandits suggest that free will is the cause of all good and all evil. The main issue with this line of thinking is that it only addresses evil that is created by human beings. What about suffering that is brought about by the natural world, like an earthquake that results in death, or a volcanic eruption that wipes out a city, or the various extinction-level events that have occurred throughout the course of Earth's history? These are natural evils. God has not bestowed free will on a volcano.
Well, here again, I have learned differently. I would have agreed with the premises that he stated, but now I'm not so sure. So he said that, a volcano or a natural disaster, so those types of things would be like randomized things that aren't based on anybody's free will. And he's implying that only God would be able to will the volcano, the hurricane, whatever, into existence or out of existence. But the implication is that they just happen on their own, as if they have their own free will, or randomness rather, because there's no thinking logic behind it. But I'm not so sure. I think the world is a much more woven, mystical place than we've been led to believe. And perhaps our ancestors were much more clever than we give them credit for. In fact, I'm certain of that. And I know that the various religious leaders of the past, the leaders of the people themselves, were convinced that their actions, their personal moral integrity, and on their part, constituted some kind of an effect within the known, for lack of a better term, cosmos, by which major events hinged as to their existence or severity if they did. So an example would be comets. Comets. Like Comet Cleaner. The comets come along in the sky at not completely regular intervals, by the way. There's always an excuse, a gravitational well or something that it passed somewhere far away. Anyway, they come along and they were harbingers of ill. They were foreboding. And the different signs in the sky, those astrological signs, were indications, perhaps from the angels, as to what mankind was stirring up for itself. And those were thought to affect the weather, the mass extinction events, if you will. And in the Bible, it does say that many of these mass extinction or these completely severe events that happened were based on such things as the morality or lack thereof of the people who had to deal with the events when they happened. So case in point, this was brought up to me in a comment, not a comet, a comment with an N, to check out in my trusty Bible, the book of Isaiah, chapter 24, because it kind of sounds like a reset event. And there are a number of them in the Bible, but this one's talking about Tyre and Sidon. And I've shown you the painting of the destruction of Tyre or Sidon. I don't know, I always get them mixed up. I think it was Tyre. But that's in chapter 23 when they talk about that. But they do mention that when Tyre is destroyed, that the city, this great city, will be forgotten for 70 years, which is pretty much an entire generation, right? So that nobody would remember it. Then it seems like it's always been there. Sound familiar? And so in chapter 23, it does also mention that the Lord visits Tyre. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's Tyre is how it's spelled. And deal with all the world's kingdoms on the face of the earth, on the flat surface of the earth. And their merchandise and hire shall be sacred to the Lord, not stored up or laid away. So the people who come in and dwell there, they'll find things for themselves, like even the clothing and choice attire and things like that. So chapter 24, devastation of the world, a remnant saved. The Lord empties the land and lays it waste. He turns it upside down, scattering its inhabitants. Layman and priest alike, servant and master, the maid as her mistress, the buyer and the seller, the lender and the borrower, the creditor and the debtor. The earth is utterly laid waste, utterly stripped. For the Lord has decreed this thing. The earth mourns and fades. The world languishes and fades. Both heaven and earth languish. The earth is polluted because of its inhabitants who have transgressed laws, violated statutes, not statues, statutes, broken the ancient covenant. Therefore a curse devours the earth, and its inhabitants pay for their guilt. Therefore they who dwell on earth turn pale, and few men are left. The wine mourns, the vine languishes, all the merry-hearted groan. Stilled are the cheerful timbrels, ended in the shouts of the jubilant. Stilled is the cheerful harp, aka electric guitar. They cannot sing and drink wine. Strong drink is bitter to those who partake of it. Broken down is the city of chaos, shut against entry every house. In the streets they cry out for lack of wine. All joy has disappeared and cheer has left the land. In the city nothing remains but ruin. Its gates are battered and desolate. Thus it is within the land and among the peoples, as with an olive tree after it is beaten, as with a gleaning when the vintage is done. These lift up their voice in acclaim. From the sea they proclaim the majesty of the Lord. For this, in the coastlands, give glory to the Lord. In the coastlands of the sea, to the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. From the end of the earth we hear songs, splendor to the just one. But I said, I am wasted away. Woe is me. The traitors betray. With treachery have the traitors betrayed. Terror, pit, and trap are upon you, inhabitant of the earth. He who flees at the sound of terror will fall into the pit. He who climbs out of the pit will be caught in a trap. For the windows on high will be opened, and the foundations of the earth will shake. The earth will burst asunder. The earth will be shaken apart. The earth will be convulsed. The earth will reel like a drunkard, and it will sway like a hut. Its rebellion will weigh it down until it falls, never to rise again. On that day the Lord will punish the host of the heavens in the heavens, and the kings of the earth on the earth. They will be gathered together like prisoners into a pit. They will be shut up in a dungeon. After many days they will be punished. Then the moon will blush, the sun grow pale. For the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, glorious in the sight of his elders. So that was chapter 24. And what I thought was interesting, many things, but I'll just narrow it down to one or two. And the main one is this, that I had mentioned this crazy idea that I came up with, that comets, I just thought, well, what do they look like there? What's a comet look like? And it looks like an opening in the firmament with water pouring out. Now, the trail of the comet could be the water or the reflection of the water. I don't know. But the way that there's kind of two tails to the comets, I think one is the reflection of it illuminated by the sun, the reflection of it off the firmament. And, yeah, so here it says, for the windows on high will be opened and the foundations of the earth will shake. And that's in the second part of verse 18 in chapter 24 of Isaiah. So I just thought that was interesting. If you agree, let me know. And so we'll continue on here. But yeah, in chapter 25 it says, for you have made the city a heap, the fortified city a ruin. So a heap would be kind of like a mud flood, wouldn't you think? All right.
In the film, the Supreme Being's vague answer could be interpreted a number of ways. One could interpret it as God not willing to explain himself fully. The robbers warn Kevin about asking about the nature of evil, but Kevin does so anyway. It's a reasonable question. Another interpretation of this scene is that God himself does not know why evil exists. Maybe he doesn't have a good reason. Maybe the real reason God says what he does at the end of Time Bandits is because that's the best Terry Gilliam can determine. Of this, he once said, "The big questions are always there for us. Michael and I had solid religious upbringings, so we grew up believing and thinking about God and religion and good and evil. I can't get those out of my system. They're a part of me. The normal approach in a kid's film is to make the final character a wizard, but why not bring God into it? Some theists do not believe it is necessary to understand why evil exists at the same time a benevolent God exists. They ration that they will figure it out in the end or in the afterlife. But this way of thinking presupposes God and the afterlife. Not to mention it is a bit of a leap in logic to assume that there is justice in heaven when there is none on earth. It's like asking, is there a God? And someone responds, we don't know, but God does. An answer cannot be a paradox to the question, and as philosophical thinkers, we should not accept inconsistencies. A requirement of philosophy is honesty. Hi everyone. If you like what I do, please click on the orange Patreon link below. That's how this show happens. It's also how you can request an episode. There are also a lot of other perks for being a patron, so check it out. The information is on my Patreon page. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next week.